Welcome in, everybody, to the Bare Knuckle Recovery Podcast. I'm Tommy Streeter, along with Nate Mollering, and like we talked about last week, we have a very special guest today. We are with Katie. Katie is the clinical director here at Fort Wayne Recovery, one of the local treatment programs in Fort Wayne. And we brought Katie in today because, anyone who listens to us or knows Nate and I knows that both of us have been to treatment multiple times. We talk about how the first time we went to treatment, we didn't really grasp anything. I mean, we learned a lot of things, but we just kind of blew it all off. And then the second time we went, we learned a little bit more, retained a little bit more, and so on and so on and so on. But, a lot of people look at it as like, well, you failed 6 times.
Right.
It's not really how we look at it. No. We learned something every time that we were there. We just didn't really apply any of those things that we learned afterwards. So basically, we're just going to talk today about why, for most people, for a lot of people, a treatment program of some sort is not, for me, it was necessary. I don't want to speak for everybody. I think for you, it was necessary.
Yes.
I think for a lot of people, it is necessary.
What I would say is it was a necessary part of the journey.
Yeah.
It wasn't the only part of the journey. It wasn't the
Absolutely.
only thing that helped me, but it was a necessary part for me because it provided structure, boundaries, discipline, something we're going to talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And so, as most people know, or maybe you don't know, but generally a treatment program starts out at an inpatient detox or residential phase. Just real quick, that's not what we're focusing on today, but real quick, the reason that generally it starts out there is because if you're using something like alcohol or Xanax or opiates of any kind, fentanyl, anything like that, generally you're going to need medical supervision while you detox. There's a medical protocol, a detox protocol that comes along, medications that come along with that, because detoxing on your own from those things can be incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, fatal.
We don't want anyone having seizures in their living room because they're trying to detox on their own.
Right.
Generally, a program like that, you can expect it to last 28 days or so. That's pretty much the norm, is a 28-day inpatient program. But what we're going to focus on today is the Aftercare program, because the mistake that I made numerous times, and the mistake that we see people make pretty often, is they go to an inpatient program, they get the drugs and the alcohol out of their system, they start feeling better, physically, mentally, and emotionally, they're feeling better. And so now they think they're cured.
Right.
I don't need to keep doing anything after this. I got the drugs out of my system, and that's what I needed to do.
Yeah.
That was my thought process for a long time. So then I would go right back home into the environment that I was in, into the chaos that I was in before, and I would relapse immediately.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had no structure. I had no one setting boundaries with me. And you think about it, I was abusing drugs and alcohol for years.
Right.
And then I get sober for 28 days, and I think that that's going to be enough to reverse everything that I did to my brain and my body over the last few years. And that's just not the case.
No, it's not. I mean, a lot of people think that drugs and alcohol are their problem. I always like to say it's a symptom of the problem. Like if we don't deal with the underlying issue, which is usually in our heart and our head, right? We'll just transfer it to something else. Either that or we'll relapse. We either go back to using substances, or what we do is we transfer it to sex, gambling, relationships, food, you name it. I mean, people do all kinds of crazy things.
Yep. This disease will manifest itself in some other area of your life if you do not address all of those underlying issues.
Yeah. So getting the drugs out of your system is a great starting point, right?
That has to happen,
right? Because if we don't get sober, and that's the thing is a lot of people talk about sobriety, and like sobriety is great. Being sober is simply just the absence of drugs and alcohol in our system.
Yep.
But what we want to do is foster long-term recovery, right?
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what we're going to talk about with why aftercare is so important. Detox is like a springboard. It like gets us started, gets us moving, gets the momentum rolling. But then it's up to us to keep it moving, and we need help a lot of times doing that. Like Tommy said, if we've been getting high for 10 years or drinking for 15 years, 5 years, even let's just say a year, and 28 days, we're not going to undo all these habits and create good new ones.
Someone said to me one time that the inpatient phase, that's like the hospital or the ambulance ride to the hospital.
Right.
And then you get to the hospital, and that's where they really start doing the work, with whatever's wrong with you. When you get to the hospital, that's when you really start getting the attention that you need.
Yep.
And so that's kind of what we compare, an aftercare program, whether like a partial hospitalization program, an intensive outpatient program. And that is where Katie comes in. Like I said, Katie is the clinical director of a program like that here in Fort Wayne Recovery, where they have partial hospitalization, intensive outpatient services. They have sober living, case management, all kinds of different things. And so we'll let Katie kind of dive into that a little bit. So can you just tell us generally, like, what does an aftercare program look like? Essentially, what's that look like?
Sure. Kind of like you mentioned, you start at the residential level of care and you get the drugs out of your system. And the goal is to be medically stable where you don't need to see a doctor every day. But what usually happens is your anxiety, depression skyrockets depending on what you were using before. And there's usually consequences to addiction. So you have to face the legal stuff, the financial stuff, the family stuff. And you're in a bubble for 28 days because they have your phone. Yeah. So you have no idea how mad people are. Right. Yeah. Right. So now you're saying, I'm ready to come and tackle it. The problem is that you've dealt with everything for the past couple of years with drugs and alcohol. Zero coping skills were needed for that. And now we're saying, not only do we want you to stay sober, we want you to clean up your mess. We want you to go back to work and earn money and make amends to everybody in your life. That's overwhelming. That's Absolutely. A lot. And we're still not dealing with, kind of like you mentioned, the underlying stuff. So now that you're sober, your system's without the drugs and your depression's worse than it's ever been. And so is your anxiety. And PHP and IOP, what we work on is kind of a combination of things to address all of those things. We start with meeting with a psychiatric nurse and looking at the depression and anxiety. And it's kind of her job to figure out, is this right now, or have you always had these problems and you were self-medicating? And she'll tell you, it's not the answer for everything, but it will be almost like a jump start for your system to feel better. Especially coming off opiates, your anxiety doesn't balance out for months because your system's so used to getting that from it that your brain stops producing it. And then we look at everything else. We didn't have any coping skills. How do we learn new ones? Communication, because relationships are strained and people are hurt. People don't trust us. And we have this idea that we have to get home quickly and make it up to them so they forgive us. Right. That's not what they want. They want to see consistency. Yeah. But also how to make your life meaningful without drugs and alcohol.
Purpose.
So, right. If you want to be great at a career, a job, or anything like that, practice structure, kind of practicing those things. So what we usually say is your job for however long you are in PHP is to do sobriety. Sure. So the time you spend at work, you spend with us. And you attend groups, you attend therapy, medical appointments, and you focus on those coping skills. Sure. How to manage anxiety, depression, how to deal with stress, how to prevent relapses. And as you move forward, you gain some strength, you start practicing those on the outside. We want you to go to meetings. We want you to meet people that are going through similar things and get your support, include your family, and then slowly start reintegrating back into life instead of that giant jump from nothing in a bubble to, oh my God, what am I going to do now? So we usually work with clients on their finances, sure. Like budgeting, scheduling. Oh my goodness. Making a schedule and sticking to it and right. Being reliable. Your kids know you're going to pick them up and you're going to pick them up. Your wife knows that you're going to be home and you're going to be home. Those are things that people are not used to. Legal stuff is really big. Usually that's kind of the rock bottom for a lot of people. And they get overwhelmed looking at the charges or whatever's going on. So we try to help them with that. But also healing for the person. When you first get sober and you start realizing what a mess addiction left, that guilt and shame is usually what brings people back every time. Is I'm sober, but I'm miserable. What's the point of being sober if I'm not happy? I'm not enjoying myself.
I've definitely felt like that before.
Sure.
And we talk about that is temporary. This is you being sober briefly. We have to create that meaning with relationships. But we try to have clients also experience that fun. Sober activities and go to the movies, go to a game, go bowling, spend time with people without using. And you see with time, but it's a healing process. It doesn't happen the first day. And eventually we say, hey, you're ready, whether it's go back to work or get a new job, but we still want to see how you do with being there. Yeah. So that's kind of IOP, where you're with us for only a couple hours and the rest of the day you focus on being home, you focus on work, and we're just like that backup safety net to see how it goes. You come back, you still do your therapy and let us know. And what I would call a successful person would be somebody that is working. Relationships aren't going to get perfect real quick, but they're on the right road for that. And we say, okay, I don't think you need us anymore. How about we set you up with a therapist in community?
Sure.
And if you're doing medicine, making sure that we set you up with a doctor. Come back and see us and tell us how great life is going.
Right. And I think one thing, I want to cover real quick is just kind of break down the levels of care for people so they understand what that looks like on a daily basis. It's like inpatient, you're there for 28 days and it's 24/7 care.
Yep.
The difference between inpatient and outpatient, inpatient is defined as you receive services where you sleep. Outpatient is simply defined as you receive services where you don't sleep. Very simple distinction. So we said partial hospitalization. I like to refer to that in simpler terms as day treatment because people hear hospital and they're like, why the heck would I go to the hospital? Well, there's no hospital involved. Well, there is sometimes. With Fort Wayne Recovery and most partial hospitalization programs, there's no hospital. So the reason we call it day treatment, you're generally there 5 days a week, 5 hours a day. I've seen some programs be 6 hours a day. So anywhere from 25 to 30 hours a week, you are in group therapy, correct?
Yes. And that's just kind of the group part. But to look at the whole picture, your days are basically you're working on your recovery. So you also, you throw in the therapy in there, you throw in there the support meetings, the gym and things like that. The ideal is for you to kind of spend those days with us because we also know you're not going to do well bored. That's
right.
One of the biggest triggers for people is being bored. So we try to keep you busy. But you're absolutely right. You don't stay on site. There's no hospital resembling thing anywhere. But we want you to act like we're your job.
Right. Yeah. And, those groups cover a lot of things. And I think it's, one of the things is like interacting with people sober, working on sober coping skills. Like a lot of people know what their triggers are, but
what to do with them.
What do you do with them? Right. Like people say, well, I'm in detox and inpatient. I picked up a lot of tools. And I said, well, you've got this really cool toolbox that's full of all these tools, but have you ever practiced using them?
Right.
If I go to Home Depot and buy a bunch of tools to be a contractor, and I'm like, I got all these shiny new tools. I bought them and I read the manual on how to use them. Am I going to be very good at building houses? Probably not. The houses are probably going to fall apart, So I like to make that comparison too with inpatient where you do pick up some tools, but then in PHP is where you spend all day.
And
learning.
You have to practice them. That's the biggest thing is we want you to spend time with your family and friends and practice them and come back and say, that didn't work. I need something different. And for individuals who say, I got everything I need at detox.
Right.
If it was that easy, you wouldn't have needed us in the first place.
Absolutely.
If your life gets to a point where you are going to detox, there's a lot going on that you can't undo in 28 days.
Right.
Plus, you weren't there. You have no idea what's been happening. And I think people also have this big fear of the longer I'm away, the longer my family has to leave me or not love me or forget about me. I have to get back right now so they know I'm trying, especially with kids. I don't want my kids not to see me. I don't want my wife not to see me. But in reality, all I see is families saying, take your time.
Yeah.
Take your time so this one sticks. And this way we don't go through, treatment again.
Right.
I want to see this long term, not just right now.
Well, people with substance use disorder generally kind of have self-esteem issues anyway and abandonment issues typically. So, they hear more time away from my family. You're right. They're thinking, well, now they're going to discover what a loser I am,
Right.
Or they're going to say they don't need me. Wow, look how easy it is without Jimmy at home, so let's kick him out. Let's get rid of him. When really that's just not the case. I always like to tell people that we don't get to choose when our families want to move on, when they forgive us, that's up to them. And the best apology is different behavior. Right. So I think like that's one way people show is by continuing an aftercare program. And it's usually about 4 to 6 weeks, right? Is the day treatment or partial hospitalization part. And then people are also receiving individual counseling as well, right? With their therapist?
Yes. So individual therapy is mandatory at least once a week, but you can always have more. And we have different therapists with different approaches. So if you want to see somebody else or if you feel like you need more than once a week, we provide that as well. And we work really hard on getting the families into because they need their own healing. They need to learn how to be a support to someone in recovery because the most common thing that I think I hear is, well, just stop.
Yeah. Right.
And then Johnny's like, well, if I could, Ma, then obviously I wouldn't be here right now. Yeah. So we work with them, help them heal and educate them. Also, they're so used to the old person that they sometimes still treat them like the person before. So trust is big, earning trust and respect, how to deal with conflict.
Right.
And instead of just avoiding it, that takes a while. And kids, kids, depending on what the age is, parents always have this belief that kids don't know. And then you get them in there.
Yeah, they know.
Yeah, they do. And they're so intelligent and so observant at home. So when we offer that, it's mostly for the kids to just ask questions. They don't want to ask mom and dad, or explain it to them in a way that they'll understand. Because a lot of them believe that they did something wrong,
Right.
or upset a parent, or they believe that it was their job to stop dad from drinking or mom from drinking.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and a lot of people, usually what they say is, what the excuse, like you said, is it's too much time. Like, it's too much time because I already did 28 days in inpatient. And now you want me to do between 25 to 30 hours a week of services at an outpatient facility. And usually what I say to people is, you spent 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 24/7 being an alcoholic or drug addict. You spent all your time pretty much devoting it to hiding your use, manipulating people, making sure that you could get what you needed. So like, that's a small time commitment when you look at it. And also if you look at the rest of your life, right? I mean,
and we do it for the families too, because what's going to happen is you're going to come home from detox and they're going to feel like it's their job to keep you safe.
Right.
And they're going to watch and they're going to make sure you go to your meetings and your therapy. And all of a sudden they're policing you. And it's exhausting.
My mom would tell you that gets really old really fast.
Right.
Moms are the worst. The best and the worst, because moms want their kids to be successful so bad that they'll just do it for you.
Yeah.
They'll make the appointments. They'll make sure you're on time. They'll get you a job.
Well, and they also they want to believe that you're doing the right thing so bad that it's so easy to manipulate them, and just because they want to believe so bad.
Right.
I mean, that's what I went through with my mom forever.
Absolutely.
So, and a lot of families, they have trauma from the use as well. So a lot of times it's good for them to have space, right, from the person to heal, so they're not triggered right when the person gets home.
Yeah. And it's a family disease. We work with them on, like, moms are a great example. You can love somebody to death, and to tell a mom to stop is the hardest thing in the world.
Yep.
Mom can't put those boundaries. That's when she calls me and I do it because she needs that help. They feel like they're going to hurt their child by not giving them everything they want. So hearing somebody else tell you it's okay, that's what they need.
Sure.
They need their own time to heal and kind of figure out what their role in that addiction cycle was.
Sure. So go ahead, Tommy. Please.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, so then the next step you talked about was intensive outpatient, which is anywhere from 3 to 5 days a week, right? Just depending.
Yes. Depends on what you're working on. For example, like if you have to find a job, obviously you can be with us to 5 days, and then you're only with us for about 3 hours a day. The rest of it is job search, case management, and kind of practicing some of the things you learned. We'd love to have people start a job or return to a job while still with us, because those have been very big contributors to substance use. Sure. Stressful job, people you don't like at work, or it's such a big trigger because you always use that at work.
Oh, sure.
We kind of want to see how you do and have your safe place to come back to if you need to.
So to me, it sounds like it's a step down process.
Absolutely.
So slow reintroduction into life. And what would you say to people who want to skip certain steps? If they say, well, PHP is good for those people, but for me, I can do IOP.
Being in this field for quite some time now, I absolutely believe you can get sober any way you want. If there's a will, there's a way. But I've seen people start that way and come back because they think they can do IOP and go back to work and be at home and take care of their kids, and it becomes overwhelming.
Right.
They don't feel good.
Right.
They're not enjoying time with their families. So the depression gets bigger and bigger. And it's almost like they feel like they have to prove themselves.
Right.
They're not being honest about how hard it actually is. And a relapse happens.
Right.
So I've seen people come back a lot, start skipping the steps, kind of picking and choosing what they want to do, and then come back and say, okay, you were right. I tried it my way. It didn't work. I had to do it that way to see, but now I'm ready. Tell me how to do it.
Sure. And I think a lot of things that's also important is just the accountability aspect of it, right? I mean, having to be somewhere, people that are not your family laying eyes on you every day, checking in. Also, drug testing can be a big component. I know for me personally, when I did Aftercare, just knowing that I was going to have to take a test and that I couldn't get over on them was a deterrent sometimes. Even when I had that small craving or even a big craving, I would think, do I really want to deal with the fallout from this? And some people would say, well, then that's the old, like, putting a gun to somebody's head approach. Well, not necessarily. I mean, it's simply a consequence that you don't, it helps you play the tape forward, in my opinion.
Yes. And one of the things that we also do is we not only test for street drugs, but also prescription. And we try to make sure that people are taking medicine as prescribed. So there's a lot of components that go with it. And what I tell families is it's my job to police them. And I promise if something happens, I'll call you. Relax. Like, this is your time to step back and work on yourself because I got this. So I know families feel a lot better knowing that you've had 50 drug screens and they're all good.
Right. So you would say that it's important to let professionals handle the accountability piece as much as possible, as opposed to the family member trying to be the counselor, the drug tester, the probation officer.
I haven't seen it work well.
Okay.
And for couples, one of them becomes the parent. And then obviously that's not the kind of relationship you want. Parents get burnt out and, they want their kids to be adulting, but they're doing all these things for them. And then the actual client resents it. I mean, you don't want to go home and have somebody wait at the door with a cup and question everything you do. So we work on those boundaries, what's okay, what's not, what the expectations are before the person goes home. So you know what to expect. And then we connect the families with resources like Mom of an Addict, amazing resource for them, meeting other parents and other families where they can go and have their concerns listened to and get some advice. So people usually try on their own. Families do quite often.
Yeah.
But what I will say is if it was my child, I know I couldn't do it. I would call you guys.
Right.
Like, I couldn't even do it with my friend when I called you to help with my friend because my heart just goes out to them. I want to protect them. I want to save them.
Yeah.
They're different.
Right.
They're not like everybody else.
Yeah.
So I know for families, the more you love, the harder it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's hard to have relationships when you have resentments.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. It's not a quality relationship if they're having to police you and make sure you're doing things instead of building that trust.
Yeah. Resentment's word of the day. If you're not familiar with it, look it up. And if you have somebody in your life that struggles and you're not holding them accountable, get used to the word resentment because you're going to have a lot of them.
Yep, absolutely. So what would be the expected overall time frame if somebody comes into the program and does every level of care? How long could they expect to be in that program? I know it's not a set number of days or anything, but just roughly, what would that look like?
Okay. So when somebody comes in from detox, that means that they've been medically cleared and they already have some medicine on board. They start in PHP, partial hospitalization, day treatment. We look at, let's get a couple things done. And we look at you creating sober support. We look at you participating in groups, therapy, making a little progress in it. And based on that is when we step you down. So I don't have a timeline. The most I've ever seen is 6 weeks, and then it goes to as little as 4, depending on how the person's doing, followed by IOP. And that one can be even more flexible because everybody's situation is different. If I'm helping you find a job, that might take longer than going back to one. If you don't have housing and you need help figuring out where to go, how to budget, how to create a life for yourself. So though that level of care, I'm trying to think, anywhere from a month to 3 months, depending on the person.
Yeah.
Some people have to go back to work.
Yeah.
They'll say either you come back or you're fired. And so we speed up the process for them. But for those that have the ability, when again are you going to get a chance in life to focus just on yourself?
Yeah.
Right.
Without all the stressors and for you to heal and get everything that you want, you're not going to get it, especially if you have kids.
Right.
Yeah.
It's going to be busy.
So it can be a few months then.
Yes.
So a few months, plus that other month of inpatient if you go that route. So people think, oh, I'm going to be in treatment for 3, 4, 5 months. That seems like a long time.
It's not.
But like it or not, this is something they're going to have to deal with for the rest of their lives.
Right.
So if you can take 3 or 4 months to, like you said, Katie, solely focus on yourself, you learned all these tools while you're at an inpatient phase. Here's an opportunity for you to really start applying them in real life situations where you're not actually at home being overwhelmed by everything. And you don't really have the ability to learn how to apply those tools and all those things that you've learned. So it's not that long of a period of time. It's actually a pretty small window for the rest of your life.
Right.
And the other thought is, I'm going to go through treatment and then I'm never going to think about this again. I know that's what you have said multiple times. That was kind of your mindset was, I want this to be over with. I want to move on. I never want to think about it again. And unfortunately, I don't know anyone that has really been able to do that and make that, just totally forget about it and act like it never happened. So...
And I think towards the end of that treatment, if you want to think about it a little differently, you're barely with us. We're not saying that we're taking you away from your family for up to 5 months. Yeah. You're going to see them every weekend. You're going to spend time with them during the week, even if you can. We see you less and less as time progresses. But you're absolutely right. I think people thinking that it's a fix and then you're done. We're more like physical therapy after a major surgery where you have to go and you have to work on it. The more you work, the easier it gets. But we do have follow-up services for clients and families, like our alumni group, for those who went back to work or might not be in the program, because they enjoy coming back and speaking about those things.
Sure.
Like, I just got out of treatment and I thought that was bad, and now it's even harder. What do I do?
One thing you guys do that's cool that I like is you guys have some sober activities with the alumni. And I think that's just highlights how important it is. The aftercare programs, one of the things they do too, it helps us with, we know the opposite of addiction is human connection, right? So it's a we program, and that's what we talk a lot about in AA. So we need a community of people around us to help support us, and we have to find other things to fill our times with, and things that we find enjoyable. So I think it's really cool that you guys do that, where you have people come back and you have like a bowling tournament or whatever it may be with the alumni, so everybody has that kind of community of people doing the same thing.
Absolutely. Well, think how hard it would be if you're in your early 20s trying to find somebody to hang out with. That's not drinking, smoking.
Yeah, it's not easy.
We remember. I do. Yeah.
So I think that age group really struggles with, how do I enjoy life again? Like, I don't have kids to take care of. I want to do something fun on the weekend, but obviously not my kind of fun. So we try to find those things, but also just spending time with like-minded people that know what it's like, that will understand, and you can have honest conversations with. Because if you go home and tell your mom you're craving, she's going to freak out.
She's going to freak out.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you need to have people that you can go tell your craving to, and they just don't bat an eye and say, okay, well, let's talk about it. Yeah, it's Tuesday.
Of course you're craving.
Right. Yeah. People say, well, what are your triggers? Well, my triggers were opening my eyes in the morning. Just being alive. I wanted to get high or drunk. That's all it took. So
absolutely.
So one of the things that you mentioned when you first started talking, when somebody comes to Fort Wayne Recovery, they see a psychiatric nurse practitioner. And you said it's her job to decide or figure out, not necessarily decide, but figure out, those underlying issues like the depression, the anxiety, the things like that you're feeling. Are those worse now because you just stopped using drugs, or is this something that you've struggled with your whole life and you were self-medicating? So and maybe you don't have an answer for this, but what percentage, I guess, do you think, or do you see of people that come in that they were self-medicating? They have been struggling with these mental health issues for the majority of their lives, whether it be anxiety or depression, and that's why they started abusing drugs and alcohol in the first place. Is it a lot of people that you see that you think that's the case for? Yeah,
absolutely. I want to say 80%, but you got to keep in mind that even the people that start with, I'm just partying, I'm just having fun, eventually get to the point where you have symptoms you're coping with using that, and then withdrawal hits. So I think 100% of clients that come through have some kind of depression, anxiety. Yeah. But to say which came first,
chicken or the egg,
right?
I don't know.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, just using myself as an example, because I'm the only person I can really speak for, I absolutely had, pretty severe social anxiety, even as a child. I definitely had some depression as a child. And the first time I got high, like all of those things were kind of quieted, and it made it a lot easier for me to just go about my daily life. So I would have to imagine that there's a large number of people that kind of felt similar ways when they were younger. They found whatever substance it may be, and it helped them quiet that. And then, of course, we know over time, as you're continually abusing these substances and these chemicals, you're just making that anxiety and that depression worse. And we won't get into the whole brain chemistry about that today. We will someday,
sure,
because it is very interesting how that works. But for me, the mental health definitely came first. But then later on down the road, the substance abuse kind of outweighed that because of how bad it got.
Right. And I think the mental health is what keeps a lot of people going back to relapse, right? I mean, that's where we see, if you treat just the like we talk a lot about, if you just get sober, to just get the drugs and alcohol to your system, but we don't deal with the anxiety, the depression. And then also another big thing that we see a lot of is trauma. I'm sure you see, like, I don't know what percentage of people with substance use disorder have trauma, but you could debate, because a lot of people would say, well, what's trauma? How do you classify trauma?
Right.
Some people say any kind of adverse experience you've gone through that has a lasting impact on you throughout your life could be trauma. But I'm sure you see a high percentage of people with SUD that are co-occurring with trauma, right?
Absolutely. We also see that during addiction, people go through crazy situations and put themselves at risk, and even watching other people overdose or losing people. I mean, how many deaths have we had in the past month? Just with people that we know.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. You see trends. You can see when somebody comes in for alcohol use disorders, depression and anxiety are the major ones, especially anxiety, because they think it relaxes you and things like that. And then you see our ADHD people that look for stimulants. Mm-hmm. So you can always see like families of mental health disorders go with these drugs, and vice versa. Those symptoms triple when you first get sober.
Sure.
Because you have been medicating them, you haven't been treating them, you don't have any coping skills that are doing anything different, and your diet usually sucks too.
Terrible.
You spend 28 days eating ice cream and slushies.
And that's not good.
Yeah.
No. And plus, then you throw in the nicotine,
yes,
everything else, and the binge watching of YouTube and TikTok, and we could get into a whole segment on that stuff too. But plus
we will someday.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of trauma and mental health in there for sure. What we see is too, like, do you see much like of a hereditary issue as far as like people who come in where it's like a continuous cycle of family members? Is that something you still think plays? There's a lot of debate like on whether there's like an addiction gene, or if it's like nature versus nurture kind of a thing. What do you see generally?
When it comes to the mental health part, I think it definitely runs in families, because you can see kind of the generations of depression and anxiety. And for people that are doing everything the way they're supposed to, eating right, exercising, and things like that.
Right.
For substance use, like you said, it's kind of hard to prove what came where, but there is a group of people that when they start using, putting it down is 10 times as hard as somebody else.
Right.
To me, that's genetic.
Yeah.
Because biology, something in your body, and those are usually the people that don't drink socially. Those are the people that drink to get drunk and get high. Mm-hmm. There's no point of just having a glass of wine.
Right.
And we see that run in the families. Now, you could say it could be genetic. It could be just them watching their parents do it. Both play a role. Both definitely do.
Well, and I think it's a good point too. Like you point in the family, and it's like that, again, that nature versus nurture thing, where that's where aftercare can be helpful too, because they talk all the time about changing people, places, and things. But how hard is that really to do, especially if everybody in your family is a user or lives some kind of lifestyle that's associated with that, plus all your friends? That is a significant change. And telling people to walk away from everybody that you know and just, do it all, and it's doable, but if you try to do it on your own, there's a high likelihood people are going to fail.
Absolutely.
So when you go to a place like Aftercare, like a place like Fort Wayne Recovery, I see people almost find this new family sometimes of people that they see really love and care about them. And there's like a genuine connection outside of just getting high and messed up all the time.
I mean, and even the people that do have, good supportive families at home that aren't in that situation, like that's still kind of the goal, is to find that new family. And even if it's in like AA or NA or some other, something, like you have to find a new group of people that for me can actually relate to because I'm the only person in my family that has ever struggled with this. So I can't really talk to anybody in my family about it. So I still had to go find a whole new group of people that could understand and relate to me. And like, like you said, if I were to tell my mom or my brother or somebody that I was craving, they'd be like, well, what do we need to do? Like, where if I tell Nate, he's like, okay, well, let's talk about it. Like, that's normal.
Plus, families tend to listen to us a little better, because imagine going to your mom and giving her advice on how to parent you differently. She's going to be like, okay, Tommy.
Yeah.
They listen to us a little differently.
Yeah.
Plus, you kind of mentioned, like, what if they're all using, they're all drinking? We don't have to say, go away. This is when we teach them about boundaries. And I'll spend time with you as long as you're sober and you don't bring anything into my house. You can stay in my life. And then if they can't, that's when we help you uphold those boundaries.
Right.
But a lot of families just don't know. They don't understand. For example, somebody's using opiates. They'll say, well, I just drink.
Right.
So it's not going to affect them. Having those conversations with them helps them become better support and explaining to them what the person goes through. Because when you first get sober, your communication sucks.
Yeah, and so you can practice those skills in aftercare, right? In a group session.
Yep.
And that's what a lot of people say, well, I don't do groups. I just want to do individual. Well, it is good to be in group therapy, right?
Absolutely. That's how AA and NA works, right? The oldest running system on how to get sober successfully is AA and NA.
Right.
So what did they figure out? A bunch of people get together and talk about how they messed up.
Right.
And what do you get from it? You get what not to do. People that understand you, people that won't judge you no matter what happens. That's not something you're going to get in one-on-one therapy, because our relationship is different. I'm not supposed to be your friend.
Right.
I'm not supposed to be your,
your peer.
Exactly. You need that, because those are the people you're going to call when you're struggling a month from now.
Yeah.
You're not going to call me, hopefully. But
yeah. I mean, like that's the concept of like peer recovery coach before they slapped a label on it and made money off of it. Like it's like that's the original free peer recovery coach right there, is the people going through the same struggle, all in a group together, doing the same thing, moving in the same direction.
Yes.
And I think it's also super important to talk a lot about too, where, we get people in inpatient all the time. You see them and, you're talking to them about moving on to the next phase, and they're like, well, aftercare sounds great, but I already have a plan. It's okay. Well, what's your plan?
I'm going to go home. I'm going to go to meetings.
I'm going to
find my own
90.
therapist. Yep.
I'm going to get a sponsor. And me and my wife are going to sit on the patio every night, and we're going to bird watch. And, we're going to cook together.
I'm never going to see alcohol again in my life.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell her how much I love her, and I'm going to give her a foot rub every night. And, I'm going to make up for everything I did. I'm going to finally fix the hole in the garage, when I punched a hole in it, which all are great. That
sounds great.
It sounds like an awesome plan. And like people come in like with this, this notepad, and they're beaming because they're like, think they're going to get a pat on the back. And these are great ideas. But often I say these are ideas. This isn't a plan. And I say, how are you going to accomplish these things? Well, I'm just going to do it. Cool. What about the day when the willingness fades? What about the day when you don't feel like going to that meeting, or you don't feel like giving your wife a foot rub like you promised her you're going to do for the next 30 days?
Oh, there's a crisis, and your kid gets sick, or somebody in a family passes away, and it's a big event that you didn't prep for.
So, and that's another great point. I always tell people, only thing that sobriety promises us is that drugs and alcohol are no longer going to be the reason our life is complicated. People are still going to die. People are still going to get sick. Your car's still going to break down. You still might get fired from your job. Your boss still may scream at you and cuss you out. Your wife still may slam the door in your face. You may get broken up with. You may get divorced. You may lose a child. All those things are still going to happen. And then what are you going to do? And so that just goes back to with all these great plans that everybody has, where they're always talking about all these things they're going to do, and they're awesome ideas. And if they follow through with it, it's really solid.
But they burn out really quick.
Well, aftercare holds you accountable. You've got somebody over your shoulder, and some people say, well, that's too much. That's smothering. Your addiction was smothering. Your addiction was trying to kill you. So and that goes with you everywhere you go. it talks to us in our own voice. We need someone to be able to step in and say, that's your addiction, trying to separate you from your support system.
Right.
Because what I always say, addiction is insidious, which means, it's evil, but it's subtle. It moves. It's very deceitful, right? It comes to lie, cheat, steal, kill, all that crap. So what it tries to do is slowly move us away from our support system. But with Aftercare, we say, hold on. You can come back this way. That's when you got people calling your phone. You got people texting you. You got people following up with you. They lay eyes on you every single day. They're there for the drug test. And if they don't, they're calling your family member or whoever you signed a release for. And they're saying, hey, something's off with Johnny. Johnny's not doing so good. Right. So those are the things that we always highlight to people that, it's awesome that you have this idea and these plans and you think these are going to be great. But most of us were not able to hold ourselves accountable for even 30 seconds out there. So this idea that now that we're sober, that we're just going to automatically go out and do this thing called recovery that we've never done before. So what I say to people is if you want something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done before. And that's really easy to say. Like Tommy and I always talk about recovery. It's not people who want it or need it. It's just people that do it.
Yep.
And that's the hardest part, right? But when you have people helping you do it, when you have people who walk alongside you and sometimes pull you along, even when you don't want to, that is what ultimately helps us be successful. And I always try to tell people, why would you not want to wrap yourself in the most support you can? Why take a chance? Maybe you are that 1% who can go out and do it on their own. Great. But what if you're not?
What I see a lot is people who are sober, but they're not in recovery.
Right.
And they're miserable. And, they don't have healthy relationships.
Yeah.
And, they don't like their life.
Yeah.
What we want to focus on is you actually enjoying it. And what you just described, leaving detox on this mission, sounds like a lot of freaking work and nonstop that you're never going to stop. You're going to burn out really quick, number one. Number two, you're a human being. You deserve to have a day when you're mad, when you're upset, when you make a mistake. That's going to happen too. And your family knows how to talk through those situations versus you just proving everybody and showing them that you're worth it. You are worth it. Mm-hmm. You can take your time. It's all right. You don't have to rush to that end result. It's going to be more genuine if you take your time with it and the whole family heals from it.
Absolutely. So Aftercare simply is accountability from people that do that professionally. If you have the opportunity to attend an Aftercare program after you finish detox, it usually is beneficial. Right?
Yes. I don't think I've ever met anybody that's hurt.
Right.
Yeah, there's not many people that regret it. That's what we tell them all the time is if you go there and you decide you hate it and you want to leave, you have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Not very many people do that. They go and they realize, okay, this isn't nearly as bad as I thought it was. I like the people that are here. I'm finally realizing.
Turns out I belong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
and I always like to tell people too, I went to treatment 10 times and I talk to people on a regular basis who are repeat, they go back to treatment 5-6 times in a year or whatever it is. And they're like, oh, that treatment didn't work. Well, usually I point out, okay, were you sober while you were there? Yes. Okay. So it did work. What didn't work? Well, you stopped doing the things that made you successful.
You didn't work.
Right. You stopped doing things that made you successful while you were there. But I also like to point out, every time I went to treatment, I learned something. Even if I didn't realize it, I always say I picked up a piece of the puzzle every time I went. And then finally, when I put the last piece into place, I could see the whole thing and it didn't make sense till I found that last piece.
Yep.
But I had to be willing to go and I had to be willing to get the pieces and I had to be willing to put them together. And then I had to have the ability and the willingness to say, okay, I can see the picture now.
Right.
So it's never a waste of time or money, whatever it is, to go to treatment and get help, even if the person ends up relapsing. And I want the family members to know that too. Mm-hmm. Say, oh, that was such a waste. Why did we waste all that time? It's not a waste. They still learn things. There's still things that are going to pop up in their head. Like even after I got sober, people started pouring into me when I was like, 12 years old, probably when I started using drugs. And, there's things that I started to hear again, like when I was 25 after I got sober, that was like, that's what they were talking about. Oh crap. I didn't even realize I heard that,
And if nothing else, you're proving that, okay, I can stay sober for 30 days. If I can stay sober for 30 days, maybe next time I can stay sober for 60 days. Certainly, it's not a waste of time at all.
Well, and the cool part about it is that 30 days, it's still just one day at a time.
Yeah.
And people get overwhelmed. And I just say, do that next thing. And if you can get that next thing done, you're going to be okay. And all you have to worry about is getting through today. And then tomorrow, when tomorrow comes, you do that next thing. And that's it. It's simple.
Yep.
I think what we see a lot from people that are returning, usually the first time you came through, you were trying to control your recovery. Mm-hmm. And you liked some of the stuff we told you, and the rest you were like, that's not for me.
Yeah.
So when you come back, we talk about just try it all.
Yep.
Just give it a chance. Don't be stubborn about it and be genuine.
Yeah.
Don't fake it till you make it with, I feel great. Everything's awesome. I don't need any help. Just tell us how much life sucks right now so we can help you get it to the point that you wanted to.
Yeah.
All right, Katie, do you have anything else that you would like to add?
Call for help. Just talk to someone. For families, for if you're struggling, there are millions of people out there that are willing to talk to you. You just have to pick up the phone.
Awesome.
You have anything else?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Well, we'll call it a day. Next episode, we will have another guest. I don't want to ruin the surprise, but we'll have another awesome guest on the next episode that we do. So as always, thank you guys all for tuning in on the podcast platforms, watching the videos on Facebook, liking and sharing our page, all that stuff. Wouldn't be able to do this if it wasn't for all the support that you guys give us. So we appreciate each and every one of you. Katie, thank you again for joining us today. Yeah. And thank you, I guess. We probably wouldn't be here without you either.
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
Yeah, you guys would have figured it out.
Maybe. All right, guys. We'll see you next time. Thank you.